Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and I'm Wyatt from Defense Politics Asia. And Commander, we have a new video coming from the Austrian military, the Österreich Bundeswehr. I think I pronounced it wrong. Anyway, they finally dropped a new video, and this video has been really popular. 5 days ago, it's already have, you can probably see 652,000 views already. It gains around 100,000 views a day. So clearly the video is very, very good. I have not watched this at all. So this video, as you can see, is for the day of 820. 820. Let me draw out my map. So this is the date, the today's one. So let me turn off the latest one and go to the day 120. So this is the 820 mapping. So on the 23rd of May. So we will take a look at what the hell is happening in his report, and I shall react to him. Fake expert reacting to real expert. So let's see how this goes. Let's play.
Welcome to the Austrian Theresian Military Academy. I'm Colonel Markus Reisner. I'm the head of the Institute 1 Officers Basic Training. And today we will have a look at the situation in Ukraine at day 820. As it looks like the Russian momentum is back. And why is this the case? We'll have a look in the next slides in detail on that situation.
So first thing first, he said the Russian momentum is back. And this is corroborating what we have been reporting, that the Russians are taking, is starting to roll over the Ukrainians. And the reality is that in the DPA's reporting, we have been reporting frontline changes reports, and every single day there is Russian advances. Every day. And that is crazy, because for long periods of time in the past 1-2 years, there is a lot of times where there is actually no frontline changes. So no, every single day is a lot. So let's play.
The starting point of today's video is phase 6, the so-called second Russian winter offensive. You might think that there was nothing going on the Eastern Front, but there was a lot going on actually. We thought during the last months that the Russians tried to attack the Ukrainian positions along the whole front line, which spreads over a distance of 1,200 kilometers. It was clearly visible that the momentum went to the Russian side during the last months. There was only one area where the Ukrainians were able to attack the Russians, and by using unmanned, uncrewed sea systems, the Ukrainian side managed to force the Russian fleet to withdraw direction east. To give you an idea what it looked like to attack from the Russian side Ukrainian positions, we will look at the
very
different
dangerous
warfighting levels. First, the strategic level and the strategic objectives of the Russian side. Like it was during the first Russian winter offensive, parallel to the land operations of the Russians, the Russian Air Force tried, by conducting a strategic air campaign, to destroy the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. We know that the manufacturing rate of cruise missiles and rockets is stable at around 150 to 130 cruise missiles and rockets a month. And using those assets, the Russian can maintain a huge operational tempo to fight against the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. To give you an example on these strategic...
I just want to highlight as well, these numbers of missiles are not accurate. 100% is not accurate. And it's important to note that this reporting come from Ukraine_map. This guy is full of shit. So if he takes the information from this Twitter account, then it's going to be horrible. So just want you to note, these numbers cannot be accurate because no one knows this kind of numbers, because these are operational secret. In fact, these are national secrets. So no one would know the number of missiles left. So it is important to note that how can he use Ukraine? Why did he use Ukraine map? Oh my freaking god. Okay, never mind. Let's carry on.
Strategic attacks. I would like to show you these two pictures, 2 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 This slide shows you the recent massive attack on the 11th of April, where you can see that the Russians try with a mixture of different weapon systems to attack critical infrastructure in the west, means in the depths of the country. The same when we look at the last huge attack in May. Also here a mixture of Iranian drones, ballistical missiles, cruise missiles and hypersonic weapons. And all these weapons aim against the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. When we now look at the operational level and the operational objectives of Russia, we can clearly see that the Russians, by using 6 massive groupings called Sabat, Center, Yug, Vostok, Zaporozhye and Dnieper, to attack along the whole front line, especially in the Donbas region. The aim of these attacks is to force the Ukrainians to use reserve.
Okay, wait. How to put it? One of these groups, if you look at the DPA's Yoke group of forces, actually fights in the Sivers, Bakhmut and Marinka sector, and so the Yoke group of forces in this side, they pointing, I believe this is Bakhmut, but actually they also attack in this area where the arrow is pointing, which is actually not accurate. The Vostok group of forces fight only in the Donetsk region. So it's only let me see how this mapping looks like. Zaporizhia, Dnieper. Yeah, there's some bit of a weird mapping. Let me see. Draw this. This is the border. This is the border. Oh my god, this mapping looks so weird. Anyway, it's not fully accurate. And then there's a full center group of forces. The center group is not fighting here. The center group is fighting at DFK. So this actually is not accurate. This is actually wrong. So, and for this to be this May 2024, I believe.
And to destroy this reserve.
Sorry, this March 2024. So let me draw out March 2024's map. So I go to the archive, March 2024. Yeah, I think March, what's the March date? March 18. So March 18, this. Because there was a transition, right? So this is March 18. And Central Group of Forces by then is already going after the Avdiivka front. In fact, Central Group of Forces actually fought entirely from the Avdiivka offensive all the way. If I can actually pick up some sources. Deep State, Ryba, let me see. Yoke Group of Forces. So Yoke Group of Forces was fighting in there September. So let me see. Center Group of Forces. In February, Center Group of Forces is already fighting at the Avdiivka front. So this information, this mapping is wrong. This is actually wrong. Wrong. Doesn't matter this is the Austrian military. Doesn't matter this is a colonel. The information is wrong. Okay? So this is why you need to watch the DPA.
It is important for the Russians to avoid any forming of future offensive reserve from the Ukrainian side and to maintain the momentum also within the next months. The problem is also that the Russians not only can use their weapons along the whole front line in a close battle, but they also can already attack different weapon systems of the Ukrainian side into the depths behind the front. I would like to show you 2 videos which gives you a clear idea what is happening here. The first video...
Wait, Zaporizhia and Dnieper. Dnieper fights the entire Zaporizhia front. There is no Zaporizhia group of forces. From my understanding, there is only Dnieper group of forces. But it's okay, never mind, small issue. I'm not going to show video.
The last level which
YouTube
is important is the tactical level. So we have to have a look at the tactical objectives of this level. Here we can see that the Russians try, by using different means, to attack the Ukrainians along the whole front line. These different means are already quite sophisticated, like the use of Lancet kamikaze drones behind the front lines, or of heavy bombs against the strong points along the front lines.
Wait. I also have a main issue, one issue about this thing. So they are using the mapping by Rusi. Is this Royal United, I believe? Royal who is this group again? About Royal United Services Institute. So the mapping is from this institute. So this is not the Austrian military stuff. So they are basically making analysis based on information from the open source. And this is something that I also always mentioned before. The quality of the analysis is highly dependent on the quality of the sources. If you have bad sources, you're going to have bad analysis. It doesn't matter how good your analyzing skills is, or how much experience you have. So do note that despite this, the Austrian military officer that is doing this briefing and probably do their own analysis, this guy is not monitoring the Ukraine war on a daily basis. It's not him. Maybe they have some planners, some guys from the planning, or some departments that is in charge of looking at the Ukraine war situation, monitoring it. Maybe they have, maybe they don't. I'm not sure, because it really depends on whether they want to dedicate this resource into doing this. The same goes to all the other different militaries around the world. Are they monitoring the Ukraine war? And if they are not monitoring the war on a daily basis, then it's much more easier for them to get duped by false information. It's very different from what I'm doing here, where I'm monitoring on the daily basis. I have much better perception of what is happening at the front line as compared to maybe this colonel, because this colonel clearly don't only do Ukraine war. He clearly have other jobs to do. He's probably commander for certain units and he need to do other jobs. So he can't be monitoring the Ukraine war on a daily basis. It takes a lot of time, and clearly, he have a high salary. Is the Austrian military or any other military spending this amount of money and resources to monitor the war? No, is it? Yeah, it's going to be a questionable thing, and also that even if they do, they cannot put it on screen because it will be classified. Because all this information the military does in intel gathering, they will not share to the public. So they are only using public sources and making conclusion from a public source. So this is something important to take note.
In terms of the type of UMPK with a weight of 1,500 up to 3,000 kilogram. Also here we would like to show you a video, and this conclusion is that we are fighting a war of attrition. So a war of attrition has its own nature, it's following its own grammar. It's resources orientated and not orientated related to terrain. So it's very important to understand that in a war of attrition, it's important to have enough resources to fight a long war. I give you one example, and this is artillery. What we can see is that in the main attack areas, the Russians are already using 10,000 artillery shells a day, while the Ukrainians only have about 2,000. In close battle, the Ukrainians try to use first-person view drones to repel the Russian attacks, but they don't have any means to attack the Russian artillery because those drones only have a limited range of up to 5, sometimes 10 kilometers, while the artillery is positioned in distances at least of 20 kilometers, even higher. And that means without these artillery shells, the Ukrainians have the problem that they cannot attack the groupings of the Russian side of the artillery, and those Russian artillery groupings are fighting against the Ukrainians, which are outnumbered. Also here we would like to show you a video. In that video
So that is true. If the Russians are using higher caliber artillery, they can actually go further. They have better artillery system to fire them. And then on the flip side, the Russians uses the Lancet to actually hunt Ukrainian artillery. And of course, if you have been following my reports or my situation reports, you probably would know that there is a lot of geolocated videos of Ukrainian artillery getting hit by Russian Lancet suicide drones. But it's also important to note that a lot of these geolocations, the artillery system of the Ukrainian side isn't sitting 20 kilometers away from the front line. Many of them are sitting within 10 kilometers or just over 10 kilometers from the front line. So the hypothesis that the Russians are sitting 20 kilometers away from the front line can be dubious, can possibly be dubious, may not necessarily be the case, but assuming that they are smart enough, they have fast enough information and whatnot, yes, it is possible. let's see. We are of course, as I mentioned before, I will have to avoid most of these video footages because YouTube don't like it. I don't want it to demonetize the video. So I'm gonna hop and see how this goes.
The next remarkable factor is adaptation from the Russian side. What you can see is that the weapon systems which were delivered from the West don't have the precision they had in the beginning of the war. For example, JDAM ERs, Joint Direct Attack Munition Extended Range, have the problem that they are actually jammed to a high scale. The same when it comes to Storm Shadow and Scalp. Also here we can see that the rate of hits have decreased significantly. The same when it comes to the HIMARS system. Also here, between 50 and 70% of the HIMARS rockets are already jammed by the Russian side. And even worse, it's when it comes to the Excalibur. Here the problem is that at the beginning of the war, about 70% of all shots were hitting their target, and now it's about 6%. And also the 6%. Problem with the drones, because also here the Russians are effectively jamming the up and down link of the Ukrainian drones.
Excalibur, if I'm not wrong, is an artillery shell. If I'm not wrong. The main problem with using all these systems is that it's not that it doesn't work, but the problem actually goes to NATO more. Because in the events of a NATO-Russia clash, in a real war between NATO and Russia, the NATO forces will find their equipments useless or greatly reduced in effectiveness against the Russians, because they are currently teaching the Russians how to countermeasure their weapons. And this is actually a massive mistake from NATO, in the sense that they are diminishing the chances of winning the tactical battles in the future if they are anticipating a possible war with Russia. And you can also see that why United States is very reluctant to send in more weapons to Ukraine, because they know and understand this fact that if they gave the Ukrainians more of their most advanced weaponry, then there is more chance of the Russians learning how to defeat all these weapons. And every time a new weapon is introduced, you can also always see that these weapons are often very effective in the beginning, from Storm Shadows to HIMARS and all these various missiles and whatnot. But always after a few months, the Russians will have enough data to feed into their surface-to-air missile systems and teach them how to intercept all these missiles and bombs. So as a result, it's not even just about jamming, but they can literally just intercept it. Of course, Ukraine is a huge country, like I always say, so they can't possibly have EW or jamming or surface-to-air missile system everywhere. So Ukrainians still can get their bombs and missiles past these umbrellas and still hit their targets. So which is what we have been seeing in Crimea. The Ukrainians still are pretty successful in hitting targets, but it is just wasting NATO's capability, in a way.
That means we can see that especially Russian jamming and electronic warfare has improved a lot. I would like to show you two videos related to that factor. The first video, you can actually see the shooting down of a Ukrainian Storm Shadow missile.
Allegedly.
And the second video shows you another Storm Shadow missile which was found on the ground and which is more or less in detail examined by the Russian side.
And this is one of the bad things that you don't want to happen.
We can also come to the conclusion that in a war of attrition, it's especially a question of resources. We can see that the Russian military spending has increased over the last 2 years. It's said that about 7 or even 8% of the gross
resources spending is wrong. Just saying. I'm not a spelling Nazi. I'm just saying.
Domestic product of the Russian state is invested in the war industry. On the other side, we see that the Europeans and the Americans are still struggling to maintain a static flow of resources into Ukraine. As a result, we can conclude that the Russians are gaining more and more momentum, and the momentum is back to the Russians. The Russians try, by using their different groupings, to attack the Ukrainian positions along the whole front line. They are using about 510,000 soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 7,000 infantry fighting vehicles, 5,000 artillery systems, 1,000...
Again, this information is an estimate based from RUSI, RUSI. And like I said, this categorization of the group of forces is already wrong. These are all estimates. No, this is not reality. This is just estimates from RUSI. Personally, don't put too much weight on this kind of thing because things changes.
1,200 multi-round rocket systems, 300 helicopters and 300 aircraft.
I thought it's air conditioned, no aircon, 300 aircons.
The Russian morale is boosted by the fact that more and more Western equipment is destroyed and even shown to the Russian people in exhibitions. These two pictures were made in Moscow on the 9th of May this year, the day of victory. And you can see that those pictures, of course, give the Russian morale a boost. The Russian winter offensive was marked by several battles which were fought along the whole Ukrainian front line. I would like to give you some examples. One example was the Battle of Avdiivka. The Russians tried by using two pincers to attack the Ukrainian city of Avdiivka and finally gained control over the city. Another example is Ocheretne. In that case, in the region northwest of Avdiivka, the Russians managed to break into the second line of defense of the Ukrainians. The Russians were saying that the flower of Ocheretne had started to bloom. Why do I say bloom? Because the Russians are trying now to extend the penetration into the second line of defense and to extend this penetration even further to the west. Another example is the battle for Chasiv Yar. Chasiv Yar is to the west of Bakhmut. At the moment, the Russians are trying to gain a foothold on the other side of an artificial channel which is going from the north to the south. What we know is that the Russians very likely already managed to form a bridgehead on the other side of the channel, and their aim is to capture these heights to the west of the channel and to have a foothold for a further attack direction west.
Is it me or is it him that DPA actually have better arrows? No, DPA draw better arrows, right?
A completely new situation has developed in the north of Kharkiv, which is the second biggest city in Ukraine. Here we have seen a new grouping of the Russian side, the grouping Sever, which means north. This grouping is equipped with about 400 main battle tanks, 1,000 infantry fighting vehicles, about 1,000 artillery systems, and it's assisted by 25 fixed-wing aircraft and 25 rotary-wing aircraft. Those units are attacking from the north direction to the south, and the Russians were able, in a very short time frame, to gain a remarkable foothold in the north of Kharkiv. The aim of this attack is threefold. First, they try to form a buffer zone to the north of Kharkiv. Second, they force the Ukrainians to use new reserves to the north of Kharkiv. And third, they form a staging area for any future operations against the city of Kharkiv. That means we can come to the conclusion that we are now transforming from phase 6 to phase 7, the possible Russian summer offensive. Just recently, General Budanov, who is the head of the Ukrainian military intelligence service, pointed out very clearly that we can expect a full Russian summer offensive in the next weeks and months to come.
Wait. Firstly, we are currently looking at the winter offensive, which is phase 6, which is what he was saying. And then the phase 7 is still an offensive. What's the difference between a winter offensive and a summer offensive? The offensive has not stopped yet. So this is a bit of a weird, weird phase. Is still the same phase? It's just that this phase is a bit long. The Russians are still in the offensive. So it's a little weird. I wouldn't say he is wrong, because maybe they have their own models of understanding how operation works. But no, for my case, it's the same offensive operation. And I also don't like to use the phases because it don't make sense. It makes it sound like as if there is some kind of a grand strategy. Generally, I feel that military-wise, in terms of operations, you develop strategies or plans based on the situation on the ground. And clearly the Kharkiv offensive is just one of these operations that is used to pin down Ukrainian forces. And we are clearly seeing what the Russians are doing. They are not pushing out anymore. They are holding whatever lines that they have captured. And this already stretched the Ukrainian resources. So, and the Avdiivka offensive has not really ended. The Russians are starting some offensive in other front lines. The Bakhmut front has started to flare up again, particularly in the northern half. I would not agree with the Austrian colonel over here regarding this phasing. It don't make a lot of sense, at least not to me. Yeah.
This new Russian summer offensive very likely will not only take place in the Donbass, but maybe very likely also to the north. That means not only in Kharkiv, but also maybe in Sumy region. And the problem is that this will extend the Ukrainian front line of about another 400 to 500 kilometers. We can also...
Wait. So another thing just now he mentioned was that the summer offensive was first mentioned by Budanov, which is the intel chief of the Ukrainian side. And personally, I personally view it more like a propaganda thing. I don't think Russia is planning a summer offensive, because then what is the Kharkiv offensive? The Russians are already in the offensive. They are already attacking. There is no summer offensive. It's just a continuation of the same offensive. But to open up a new front over at Sumy, that is possible. The expansion of Kupian's offensive, I don't think so. No. Because ultimately, because he is just simply talking about based on what Budanov have said, based on what the objective of the Russians are. Because if the Austrians' position was that they think that the Russians are wanting to conquer the whole of Ukraine or conquer as much of Ukraine as possible in the shortest time possible, then I think that the analysis is based on the wrong endpoint. The Russians are in a war of attrition, which is what he said as well, which means that the Russians have no reasons to push out too hard. They only push out in areas that they want to push out, and then in the other areas, they are meant to stretch the Ukrainian logistics as much as possible and grind down the Ukrainian military, because one of these special military operations objective is demilitarization. So, and the idea is, what is demilitarization? It is to fight to the point where the Ukrainians can't fight anymore. That is demilitarization. So when the Ukrainians have no more military means, no more capability to really fight effectively, then when the Russians are able to roll over the Ukrainians at easily, just roll over them, take any ground that they want, then demilitarization have succeeded. So until that moment is the case, then the Russians are not going to go into a major offensive in the Kupian's offensive, or even Sivas. They are taking some grounds because they just want to have a better strategic location, the high grounds at Bilohorivka or something. But generally, most of this front line right now, I think the Russians are very comfortable. Have you watched my video on my shots on this bunker? The Russians have such a good bunker. They even installed PlayStation. They're happy to stay where they are. So there's differing point of view in terms of DPA and the Austrian military. So let's watch on.
Also see that the Russians are using already different types of new weapons and assets. So we can see that their tanks have improved. We can see that they're using more and more infantry in a very sophisticated manner. We see the success of Russian jamming and electronic warfare, and we see more and more artillery, more and more of these FAB UMPK bombs, and of course first-person view drones. Also here we can see a new development. We see that the war is fought more and more in an autonomous way. I would like to show you a video where you can see Russian ground robots trying to reconnoiter Ukrainian strong points, and those robots are attacked by Ukrainian first-person view drones.
Yeah, so these are not important.
That gets the resources to the front to fight this war of attrition. It is obvious that the Allies struggle to assist the Ukrainians. One good example is the United States. It looks like that the United States have a global strategy and they try to make sure that it is not escalating on a global level. I give you two examples. First, obviously the Americans don't like that the Ukrainians try to attack Russian targets in the deeps of the country because this might increase the price of certain goods on the oil market. On the other side, we see also that the Americans try to moderate somehow the conflict in Gaza because they're trying to force the Israelis not to escalate the situation in Rafah. And that gives you a clear example that there is some kind of a grand strategy behind it. The elephant in the room, of course, is also the question, what about all these nuclear weapons we see especially in the Russian arsenals? And we know today that in 2022 it was already maybe very close to a possible use of tactical nuclear weapons, because at that time when there was the fight of the Russians in the bridgehead of Kherson, especially American intelligence services thought that there will be the use of nuclear weapons from the Russian side. And it was the case that with the help of Indian and Chinese negotiations, it was possible to calm down the situation.
Wait. Okay, first, impossible. Okay, that's impossible. So, firstly, CNN, that's one big red flag. Second thing is that what happened in late 2022? Late 2022, the Ukrainians are on the offensive. And they started the Ukrainian counter-offensive in Balaklia in September 2022, and then in October 2022, the Ukrainians went into the Kherson offensive, and by around November, December, the Russians withdrew under Surovikin's command down to the southern part of the Dnieper River, abandoning the northern half of the Kherson region. All this. Then after that, in November, so that is around November, that was also around when the mobilization, the partial mobilization in Russia have been initiated. And in December, that's when the withdrawal happened, if I'm not wrong, because the November was the partial mobilization. The VDV, the airborne forces, was immediately rushed into the Kherson region. Most likely these airborne forces are probably mobilized. And so they immediately went to the Kherson to stop the Ukrainian Kherson offensive, which was initially pretty successful against the Donbas militias. And when the VDV entered the frame, the Kherson offensive grind to the halt. And the Ukrainian forces and their international legion lost a lot of troops in their offensive because they were doing this blitz with Humvees. And they basically got scammed into going into kill boxes and got killed because they didn't realize they were fighting totally different troops. In the beginning, they were fighting militia, Donbas militias. Then after that, they met the VDVs, which fights in a totally different way. They're better equipped. They have better tactics. So, and then the Russians prepared the groundworks for the withdrawal. And then they withdrew down south to the southern part of the Kherson region. And if you look at the situation, then the Russians have already announced partial mobilization. They are going to swell the entire Ukrainian front line with more troops, and also that these mobilized troops are not allowed to demobilize until the end of the special military operation. This is part of the law. So these troops entering will fight all the way to the end. That is the mobilized troops. For those that did not realize this or have already forgotten, the mobilized troops are not allowed to demobilize. And then the new contract troops that the Russians are now recruiting is to expand the military from 1 million to 1.5 million troops. And this is not inclusive of the mobilized troops. So if you look at this general strategic picture, there is no reason for the Russians to go into tactical nukes for Ukraine. They are not that desperate. They're just not that desperate. Even in the Balaklia offensive that transit into the fighting on the eastern part of the Oskil River, the International Legion and the Ukrainian forces was pushing and trying to capture as much ground as possible before the mobilized troops arrive. They did not go very far. They reached around where the front line currently is, and the mobilized troops without training was rushed to the front line to plug the hole. That's why we have all these initial complaints. There is coming out online about the mobilized troops not given the 2 weeks training that was mentioned, or 3 weeks training that was mentioned, and then they were immediately thrown into the front because the situation was desperate, but not desperate enough to use tactical weapons, to be honest. So yeah, so I have to push back regarding this, especially he's using CNN as his source. Definitely don't make sense.
But when we look in detail into the information domain, we can see that the Russians are trying to play with us. They try to spread fear because they show us that they have these assets available in their arsenals.
And also no reasons for Xi Jinping and Modi to avert a crisis. None of them believe Russia will lose the war. So this is US officials says, but US officials is also full of shit many times.
Therefore, we would like to show you a video of the launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile from the Russian type Topol. And this is a clear indicator that the Russians try to spread fear in the information domain. And when it comes to fear, it's always a bad advisor when it comes to decisions you have to make on the battlefield. Russians also have other assets we might have not on the table immediately. One clear example is the space domain. Just recently the Americans sounded off and told us that the Russians very likely have launched an anti-satellite weapon. And that gives you a clear indication that the Russians, of course, in addition to the assets they have in the land war in Ukraine, have further assets, especially in different other domains, like I have explained before, in the space domain.
Wait. It's getting a bit weird. This report is about the Ukraine war. So why the hell are we talking about satellite, space battles, or space technologies? Unless he's suggesting that it's the collective West currently fighting Russia. If it's not the case, then this is detracting away from the situation actually in Ukraine, because this is basically, talking about the geostrategic, battles between the West and Russia, which isn't the Ukraine war, right? Ukraine war isn't that, right? I'm quite sure Ukraine war isn't NATO versus Russia, right? I think this is a bit of a detraction away from what is actually happening in Ukraine. The launch of the satellite, even if it's a killer satellite, the purpose clearly is geopolitical. The Russians do military exercises. So does NATO. NATO also do massive military exercises. So everybody launched new weapons. So this has nothing to do with Ukraine, in case you got lost.
So the question is, what about the allies? So we see that the Americans and the Europeans are delivering sophisticated weapon systems. Like, for example, the ATACMS, these ground-to-ground launched rocket systems. And of course, they are used and they have success. I would like to show you a video where you can see the use of such systems against a ammunition depot fully equipped with...
So I cannot show you this, but the thing is, these planes, there are rumors that these are not operational Russian jets, that these are actually Ukrainian Soviet-era airframes that is no longer used. So there is I personally I do not know. So it's it can be anything. But I'm just saying that there is some information contradictions around here about this attack. And
military principle of saturation. What does it mean? It means that those attacks have to be conducted on a daily basis in a certain time frame, in a way that you really can see measurable effects on the battlefield. That means, for example, a stop of the Russian attack. And we still don't see those measurable effects. So we see...
Yeah, so what he's saying is that these one-off attacks cannot be measured. This is also the same reason why I don't like to report on missile strikes. So I only report on missile strike if it hits an air base, hit a train station, because I think it's significant enough. But generally speaking, it's pretty useless. Hitting supply depots, hitting those warehouses, some big massive explosion look like nuclear weapons. It doesn't matter because we cannot measure it. The only way to measure is through frontline changes, and which is also why that's where my preoccupation right from the beginning of the war is. Because if there is no frontline changes, how the hell you know? It doesn't matter what the pro-Ukrainian side like to say about the Russians using human waves. It doesn't matter if the Russians using human wave and they lose 10 times the number of manpower than the Ukrainians. If the Russians continue to take grounds, all I can say is that the human wave is working. If you have to assert that the human waves is the strategy that the Russians are using. So, and if the Russians feel that human waves is the way to win the war and they can win the war, then so be it, man. They win the war. It doesn't matter if they actually have 10 million Russians dying to take over Ukraine. It's the tactic. That's their strategy. And yeah. But the reality is that's even not the case, because why would you use the human wave when you have advantage in air strikes, air power, artillery power, you can have helicopters, total air dominance. Why would you use human waves? No one use human waves ever in any kind of warfare except the Japanese, where they go into banzai charges and then just die to machine guns. Those are World War I tactics that no one use anymore. So yeah, reality.
See striking attacks with Western weapon systems, but we don't see measurable effects on the battlefield. Like, for example, we have seen with the HIMARS system in 2022, the so-called HIMARS effect. There is still no ATACMS effect. On the other side, you can obviously see that Russia have very trustable allies and even friends. So we know that China, for example, is delivering certain goods which the Russians can use for their armament production. We also know that the Iranians are delivering drones on a high scale, drones of the type of Shahid. It's said that several thousand of them were delivered to Russia, and with the help of Iran, Russia is already able to produce its own Shahid drones, which they call Garan 2. We also have countries like North Korea. It's said that the Russians last year produced 3 million shells of artillery rounds, while the North Koreans delivered another 2 million. So that means 5 million artillery rounds were available.
So just to add on a bit about North Korea is that North Korea, before the war, is under severe sanction. They are the most sanctioned country in the world, like literally more than Iran, more than Russia. And to the point where even China was following with the sanction on North Korea. Russia went in because it's like the West have already overplayed their hands. Russia decided that okay, we shall lift the sanction with North Korea. So Putin met with Kim Jong-un and basically they opened up trade. And I believe the trade is between Russian grains and Russian energy for North Korean production of ammunition. And Putin also went into North Korea and also offered help in the North Korean space and rocket program. So around a month after Putin's visit, or the meeting between the two leaders, the North Korean satellite successfully launched into space. That was the first time they ever managed to do it, and it comes after most likely Russian experts went in to help them calibrate their shit and get it to fly. So, and in fact, in the North Korean and Russian relationship is closer than the Chinese and North Korean relationship. So this is important to note because North Korea themselves are very afraid of China. So the relationship, this build up of relationship with Russia benefits North Korea, and North Korea now also do not have food and energy issues, just like China. So this Western section of Russia, or this participation in the Ukraine war, basically have helped China and North Korea build up this backup, this backup plan, and are able to survive any form of sanctions. So it is what it is.
So the question is, are we closing into a culmination point? And the culmination point is a situation from the military perspective which you should avoid, because if you cross over the culmination point, you can never return. And that means for you...
in my opinion, already cannot return. There's no way Ukraine can return unless NATO enters war. And then you can go back to some kind of parity. Without NATO entering war, Ukraine on their own is not possible. It's just not possible.
Ukraine that very hard weeks and months are coming. And when I look at the statements of Ukrainian officials like the president or even military personnel, you can see how desperate the situation is. Here we would like to show you a video showing the Ukrainian president who...
Okay, so this Rusi on the 14th of May talk about the Russian summer offensive can be blunted if Ukraine get enough ammunition. We haven't even reached summer. The Russians are already pushing every single day. Why are everyone so obsessed with summer offensive? The Russians have not ended their offensive at all. This is the problem with no propaganda. If you believe your own propaganda, you're going to ignore reality. The reality is the Russians are on the offensive. They lost entire of Avdiivka. They lost most of the surrounding regions of Avdiivka. They lost huge chunk of the Kharkiv region. The Russians are taking back Robotine. Krasnohorivka in the Donetsk region is falling. Russian forces captured Novomihailivka. They are pushing south in the south of Novomihailivka towards Vodian. Chasiv is under pressure. According to my sources, the Ukrainians might be abandoning Chasiv very, very soon. Why are we still talking about summer offensive? The offensive is now. So,
who tried to explain very clearly and straightforward how the situation is and why it is so important that they have assistance from the West.
No, I'm not going to listen to him. There's no point. No. That's just propaganda. Forget it.
So the question is, will the Ukrainians be supplied with all the assets they need?
Why do they spell resources in this way? Double S.
More aircraft. So for example, F-16s. They need more tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and especially ammunition. They also need more...
Okay, I summarize for him. It's faster. Ukraine needs everything. They need another 2-3 armies that Ukraine have in the beginning of the war. So we can skip this entire part of him reading this slide. It's a waste of time.
Air defense not only can have a strong position in any future negotiations related to peace or at least some kind of a stalemate. And the aim of the conference is to show the Western world how desperate the situation in Ukraine is and to form a coalition of the willing in assistance of Ukraine. At the end of my today's brief, I would like to say a few words about myself. As a general staff officer, you have to command a battalion-sized unit for a certain time frame.
Wait. AEIOU? Oh, that's so cool.
I did this by commanding the Guards unit for 1.5 years. This is now concluded and I have returned to the Austrian Military Academy, where I'm heading now the Institute on Officers Basic Training, which is a very, very important task because it's now on us to train the future officers of the Austrian Armed Forces, young men and women, and to make sure that they have a clear understanding on the future of war and how the battlefield is changing. And because of the fact that we want to improve ourselves, we're trying to conduct high-level conferences where we invite internationals to have a clear understanding of what was going on the battlefield and to make sure that this information is transferred into the training of the Austrian officers. That concludes my today's briefing. I would like to say thank you very much and see you the next time.
Thank you, sir. Good job, sir. So yes. So this is the full review of this Austrian military's report or situation report. This is actually also some kind of a situation report. It's a kind of sit rep of the situation in the Ukraine war. Clearly, I don't really like the sources that they are using. Rusi is, but but it's still is a good introductory, to the situation in the Ukraine war. Again, very objective, very neutral. In my opinion, slightly pro-Ukraine because they are talking about like defending Ukraine is like the ultimate thing. Like it's very, very important, but it's just war. Like, because it really depends on whether you believe that the Russians are going to conquer the rest of Europe. If you look at the situation in Ukraine, there's clearly no reasons for Russia to go all the way to the rest of Europe because if it takes so long to take down Ukraine, why? It makes no sense to go further. It's Ukraine alone, even when they are mostly Russian speaking, and even Ukrainian itself, the Ukrainian language is very similar to Russian. It's already going to be a massive headache for Russia to rule over. So don't talk about trying to rule over the Polish, the Moldovans, the Romanians. No, it's not going to happen. I don't think the Russians are going to go there, unless the NATO sides enter the war and starting to strike Russia, and then it becomes a NATO-Russian war. Then Russia will be left with no choice but to go all the way to the different capitals, or until these respective NATO countries sign they give up, sign the treaty of peace or surrender or cessation of hostilities and whatnot. So if you play enough computer games, Europa Universalis or whatnot, you'll probably be more familiar with this kind of situation where there will be a point where you can't fight anymore. You will just sign a treaty and just give in. You pay some reparations and whatnot. Depending on how much the enemy wants you to get out of it. You may get out of the war without much losses in terms of resources or repayments, but this is likely what's going to happen. And yeah, so otherwise, yeah, if you base on this analysis that Russia is going to go all the way to the rest of Europe, then of course you're going to have a massive problem. Similarly, it applies for all the other different conflict zones. It's the same. Like be it China, would China conquer the rest of Asia? No, China will not. They don't even bother. But Taiwan, yeah, they would. So Russia, same thing. Rest of Europe, nah. Whole of Ukraine, I also don't think so. Half of Ukraine, high chance. So by have some kind of sensibility in terms of analysis, we will be closer to where reality is. Anyway, again, very thank you to the Austrian military for producing all these programs. It's very important because Austria is a neutral country. The position, the kind of things that they say is much more respected by both sides. And I think generally speaking is Colonel Marcus Reisner, good luck for his new appointment. And I think hopefully we'll continue to get more reports from the Austrian military. I think Colonel Marcus Reisner was not going to be the next presenter, as he has this new appointment in the academy. So we're probably going to see a new guy presenting the SIPREP. So whatever it is, thank you everyone for watching. Commander, thank you for attending this SIPREP of a SIPREP. The reaction of a fake expert to a real expert, and hopefully you guys, the real experts here, enjoy this video. It's a long video, no doubt, because 23 minutes plus my commentary. Of course, it's going to be quite long. So yeah, thank you for watching. Do press the like button, subscribe. Of course, continue to follow DPA on our situation reports. Algorithm is not friendly to us. It really depends on you to search DPA's video out and watch it. The more you watch it, the more YouTube will recommend it to you and to other people. This is just how it works. And yeah, and together we will continue to have more objective appreciation of the front line. Not taking any sides, not pro-Russia, not pro-Ukraine. It's pointless to cite any sides. It's not our war. So no, unless it's your war, then you can go and watch Danny Davidoff or maybe Military Summary, I don't know. So thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next update.